What if the most powerful civilizations in human history didn't fall with fire or war, but simply slipped away? Cities once filled with voices, footsteps, and ritual now sit in perfect silence, as if everyone stood up and left at the same moment. No final message, no warning, just absence. Across deserts, jungles, islands, and mountains, entire societies vanish so quietly that even time seems unsure how it happened. Stone walls remain, streets still lead somewhere, but the people are gone. And the unsettling truth is this: many of them believe their world would last forever. Tonight, we step into that silence, not to solve every mystery, but to listen to what these lost civilizations still whisper, and to ask what their disappearance might be quietly telling us about our own future. In the quiet stillness of the night, when a world has softened to a gentle hum and thoughts begin to drift like slow-moving clouds, we turn our attention to a different kind of silence, the silence left behind by civilizations that once shaped the world, only to fade without a final chapter. History usually offers us long, detailed stories about the rise and fall of empires. We learn about victories, discoveries, rulers, and revolutions. Yet some cultures left behind no grand farewell, no record of collapse, no carved declaration of their last moments. They simply vanished, leaving questions resting like shadows over the ruins. And it is in this soft space between what we know and what remains hidden that our journey begins. There is something deeply comforting and unsettling at the same time about ancient civilizations that disappeared. On one hand, their lost presence reminds us how fragile human achievement can be. On the other, their mysteries invite the imagination to wander freely, unbound by clear explanations. As you settle in, this story will unfold like a slow, steady breath, calm, unhurried, and filled with the gentle contrast between light and dark, known and unknown. These vanished worlds are not presented as puzzles demanding solutions, but as quiet echoes that linger across deserts, mountains, oceans, and forests, inviting us to listen. When we think of civilizations, we often picture bustling streets, complex societies, and the unmistakable rhythm of daily life. People sharing meals, trading goods, raising families, and telling stories by firelight. But history, with all its fascination, sometimes leaves behind only the faintest traces of these lives. A pottery shard half buried in dust, a stone wall surrounded by tall grasses, empty canals that once carried water to thriving fields, and ruins whose purpose scholars still debate in soft voices. These fragments are like whispers, fragile hints of worlds that were once full and vibrant. Many civilizations vanish for reasons that seem almost mundane when viewed through the long lens of time. Changing climates, shifting rivers, failing harvests, or new settlements offering better opportunities. Others disappear because more powerful cultures spread across their lands, absorbing them so completely that their individual identity dissolves into another. And sometimes, the earth itself rewrites the landscape, through earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, droughts, or floods, leaving once thriving cities abandoned. But while the reasons may exist, the complete stories rarely survive. Nature erases, humanity forgets, and the past sinks quietly beneath layers of time. The charm of these lost civilizations lies in how they balance what we can confirm with what we can only imagine. Archaeologists uncover walls and bones, roads and tools, clues and patterns. But the people who lived in these places remain distant, like figures walking behind a curtain of mist. Their voices, languages, beliefs, joys, and fears often remain unrecorded. And so we turn to their ruins with a kind of gentle curiosity, knowing that the same wind that brushes through those ancient stones is the wind we feel today. It connects us, softly bridging thousands of years. As we begin this journey, imagine yourself walking slowly through a vast desert at dusk. The sky glows with the last light of day. The sand beneath your feet cools. Ahead, half hidden by rocky formations and shadows, An ancient city slowly reveals itself. Walls carved into cliffs, pathways lined by fallen columns. The quiet hum of history resting in the air. This is Petra, home of the Nabateans. Masters of stone who left behind extraordinary monuments, but few clues about their final fate. Their presence was once powerful. Their disappearance remains puzzling. But before we arrive at these stone-carved halls, we pause here in this opening moment to acknowledge something simple yet profound. Every vanished civilization was once alive, not as an idea, not as a mystery, but as a community filled with laughter, arguments, celebrations, and dreams. They lived their lives assuming continuity, never imagining they would one day be reduced to relics and unanswered questions. And perhaps that is why their stories resonate with us. They remind us that time is both generous and indifferent. It allows cultures to grow to unimaginable heights, yet can sweep them away quietly, leaving only a trace for future generations to wonder about. Throughout this documentary, we will drift through deserts, mountains, jungles, islands, and plains. We will explore civilizations that built brilliantly engineered cities, sophisticated trade networks, spiritual monuments, and artistic masterpieces, only for their existence to dim and eventually slip into obscurity. Each civilization you encounter will offer a contrast, the brightness of what they accomplished against the darkness of what we no longer understand. This balance is not meant to create tension, but to create a sense of calm mystery, an atmosphere where curiosity moves slowly, like water shaping stone. The journey will not rush. It will breathe. It will move with the gentle cadence of night, guiding you deeper into places that once held life, now softened by centuries of silence. Some of the civilizations we'll visit vanished suddenly in moments of catastrophe. Others faded gradually, disappearing like the final stars before sunrise. But every story holds a quiet beauty, an untold elegance that remains even in ruin. As we step forward, you may find yourself imagining the people who walked these lands, their footsteps blending with yours, their voices weaving faintly into the air. That closeness between your present moment and their long-lost world is where history becomes more than facts. It becomes an experience, a reflection, a gentle reminder of how much remains hidden beneath the surface of human memory. And now, with eyes soft and mind open, we drift toward our first vanished world, a civilization sculpted in rose-red stone, shimmering beneath an ancient sun, waiting quietly for us to explore its mysteries. In the heart of the Arabian desert, where the winds carry grains of sand like whispered memories, lies a city carved not merely from stone, but from ambition, skill, and quiet mystery. Petra, the rose-red jewel of the Nabateans, stands as a testament to a civilization that seemed to understand both the harshness and beauty of the desert more deeply than any other. When travelers first approach Petra today, walking through the narrow passage of the Sikh, the walls rise around them like towering curtains, guiding them forward until the treasury appears, glowing in soft pink light. It feels like stepping into another world, a world where the creators left behind incredible monuments, yet carried away the secrets of their disappearance. The Nabateans were not a loud or boastful people. They left few written records and even fewer inscriptions describing their rulers, battles, or beliefs. Much of what we know comes from outsiders, Greek and Roman writers who observed them from afar. To those observers, the Nabateans appeared almost paradoxical, wealthy yet modest, powerful yet elusive, deeply connected to trade yet resistant to adopting the customs of surrounding empires. Their civilization thrived between the 4th century BCE and the 1st century CE, controlling trade routes that carried incense, spices, silk, and precious goods between Arabia, the Mediterranean, and beyond. And yet, despite this prominence, their origins remain softly blurred. Some scholars believe they were nomadic tribes who gradually settled and built their kingdom. Others think they were long-established desert dwellers who simply shifted into a more urban and structured life. The desert, with all its secrets, keeps their beginnings hidden beneath layers of time. As we wander through their stone-carved city, we begin to understand their genius. Petra is not merely a collection of buildings. It is a blueprint of survival. The Nabateans mastered hydrology, creating channels, cisterns, dams, and reservoirs that captured and stored water in one of the driest regions on Earth. When flash floods tore through the sick, their expertly carved channels redirected water, preventing destruction. When seasons turned harsh and water became scarce, their reservoirs ensured the city continued to thrive. This mastery allowed Petra to become more than a stop on the trade route. It became a sanctuary, a city of merchants, artisans, and leaders who shaped the desert landscape to their will. Despite their achievements, the Nabateans lived humbly compared to other ancient powers. Their kings rarely carved grand statues of themselves. They left behind no lengthy chronicles, no written declarations of victory. Their art and architecture focused more on blending with nature than overpowering it. This humility, while admirable, has also deepened the mystery surrounding them. Without their own voice preserved in writing, much of their identity must be reconstructed from ruins, pottery, and the quiet logic of their engineering. As the centuries passed, the world around the Nabateans shifted. The Romans expanded across the region, absorbing smaller kingdoms into their empire. Traders began taking new routes, choosing sea travel over land caravans. The very trade networks that once enriched Petra began to weaken. By 160, the Nabatean kingdom was annexed peacefully by Rome. Interestingly, there was no dramatic last stand, no recorded battles, no sign of resistance. It was almost as if the Nabateans, known for valuing adaptability and survival, simply stepped aside, allowing the tides of change to flow around them. Yet even under Roman rule, Petra remained populated for centuries. Temples were expanded, streets repaved, and new buildings added. But the quiet decline had begun. Earthquakes struck the region, some devastating enough to collapse key structures and damage intricate water systems. As Roman trade routes shifted further away from land caravans, Petra's economic lifeblood thinned. Slowly, residents drifted elsewhere. Fields dried. Buildings fell still. The desert reclaimed the city inch by inch, covering streets with sand, softening the once bustling marketplace into a silent valley of carved facades. And then, in a way that feels almost cinematic, Petra slipped from the world's awareness. For centuries, it survived only in whispers and half-remembered maps. Local Bedouin communities knew of it, of course, but it remained hidden from outsiders until 1812, when Swiss explorer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt, disguised as an Arab traveler, was led through the sick and became one of the first Europeans in modern history to lay eyes on the ancient treasury. His account reintroduced Petra to the Western world, sparking fascination, research, and romantic imagination. But while archaeology has revealed much about Nabatean trade, agriculture, religion, and architecture, the central question remains: how did a civilization so skilled and so adaptable fade so quietly from history? There are theories, each reasonable, each incomplete. Some scholars point to economic decline caused by shifting trade routes. Others emphasize natural disasters, like the earthquakes that shook Petra multiple times over the centuries. Some believe cultural integration into the Roman world slowly dissolved the Nabatean identity. Another possibility is environmental change, overuse of local resources, deforestation, or gradual drying of nearby water sources. And a more philosophical perspective suggests that the Nabateans were so adaptable and fluid in their identity that blending into other cultures was not a sign of collapse, but simply evolution. Whatever the cause, the contrast between the grandeur they built and the quietness of their disappearance is what keeps the Nabateans wrapped in mystery. Unlike some civilizations that left behind long narratives, the Nabateans chose stone over scrolls. And stone, though strong, speaks softly. It offers shapes, not explanations. Shadows, not certainty. Walking through Petra today, especially at dusk, one can almost feel the presence of those who lived here. The red walls glow with fading light. Carved tombs stand silently, their intricate details softened by time. The air carries a cool stillness, broken only by the occasional sound of distant footsteps. It is in these moments that the Nabateans feel closest, not as a solved mystery, but as a lingering presence. Their disappearance, like the desert itself, resists clarity. But perhaps it is what makes their story so captivating. They remind us that even the most impressive civilizations can fade, not in dramatic downfall, but in quiet dispersal. They show us that history is not always written in language, but in landscape. And they invite us to listen, to the winds that move through the canyons, to the empty courtyards, to the ancient walls that once echoed with life. As we step back from Petra's rose-colored cliffs and feel the desert sands beneath our feet, our path leads naturally toward the sea. For while the Nabateans shaped the desert stone, our next civilization shaped its identity upon the restless waves of the Aegean. And just as the desert holds its secrets, the sea has its own stories of a people who vanished long before history could fully capture their world. Far out in the glittering waters of the Aegean, where sunlight dances softly across the blue horizon and islands rise from the sea like ancient guardians, the story of the Minoans begins, mysterious, elegant, and quietly haunting. They were among the earliest advanced civilizations of Europe, flourishing on the island of Crete long before the rise of classical Greece. Their world was one of artistry and harmony, filled with winding palace corridors, colorful frescoes, and a maritime spirit that connected them to cultures far beyond their shores. And yet, despite their brilliance, the Minoans slipped into history with no clear explanation, their disappearance wrapped in the shimmering veil of myth, disaster, and silence. When we think of the Minoans, we often imagine the Palace of Knossos, its bright murals depicting dancers, nature, and ceremonial scenes, its labyrinth-like layout inspiring legends that would echo into Greek mythology. But the Minoans themselves wrote no grand histories of their achievements. They kept no confirmed written accounts describing their downfall. Instead, their legacy survives through the remnants of clay tablets, architectural ruins, and delicate artworks that still whisper of a refined, peaceful people. In a world often shaped by warfare, the Minoans seemed different, more focused on trade, celebration, and craftsmanship than conquest. As we step through the imagined halls of Knossos, the atmosphere feels dreamlike. Columns painted in red and black rise beside frescoes, showing leaping dolphins and floating lilies. Light filters down into open courtyards where festivals may once have taken place. The air carries the faint echo of footsteps. Merchants, artists, priests, and dancers who once filled these spaces with life. The Minoans built their palaces not as fortresses, but as vibrant centers of culture and ceremony. Their lack of defensive walls suggests a confidence in their world, a belief in stability. And yet, this same sense of openness makes their eventual disappearance even more enigmatic. The Minoan economy was deeply connected to the sea. Their ships traveled widely, reaching Egypt, the Near East, and mainland Greece. They traded pottery, olive oil, wine, and finely crafted goods, weaving a network of exchange that brought wealth and influence to their island home. This maritime strength is one reason they are often called a thalassocracy, a sea-based power. But the sea that sustained them also held dangers that would one day shape their fate. Among the most striking contrasts in Minoan history is the tension between their flourishing cultural life and the quiet, unresolved question of their end. For many years, scholars pointed to one event as the primary cause of their collapse: the eruption of the volcano on the nearby island of Thera, modern-day Santorini. Around 1600 BCE, the volcano erupted in one of the most powerful explosions in human history. Ash darkened skies, Tsunamis swept across the sea, and shock waves rippled through the Mediterranean. It would be easy to imagine that the Minoans were instantly destroyed by this catastrophe. The story feels almost mythic, an advanced civilization undone by the wrath of nature. Some compared it to the legend of Atlantis, though the Minoans themselves left no myth claiming such a narrative. Yet modern research paints a more nuanced picture. The eruption undoubtedly had a devastating impact, but it may not have ended Minoan civilization entirely. Instead, it seems the Minoans continued for a century or more afterward, albeit weakened, disrupted, and vulnerable. This is where the mystery deepens. If the eruption alone did not seal their fate, what did? Some scholars believe economic decline and environmental exhaustion slowly eroded their stability. Others point to invasions or influence from the Mycenaeans, a rising power on mainland Greece who eventually occupied Crete. Still others suggest internal difficulties, political upheaval, religious changes, or a slow unraveling of their once cohesive society. Each theory carries evidence, yet none offers a definitive conclusion. It is this blend of partial clarity and lingering uncertainty that makes their disappearance so captivating. As we imagine Crete in the centuries following the Thera eruption, the landscape becomes quieter. Some palaces were rebuilt, only to be destroyed again by unknown causes. New pottery styles emerged, suggesting cultural blending or shifts in leadership. Earthquakes, common in the region, may have repeatedly damaged their structures. And slowly, the uniquely Minoan character of the island faded, replaced by Mycenaean influences. It was not a sudden collapse, but a slow dimming of a cultural flame. Walking through the ruins today, the silence feels both peaceful and poignant. Rubble outlines the once grand rooms of Knossos and Phaistos. Broken steps lead to platforms where rituals may have taken place. Fragments of frescoes cling to walls, their colors muted by time, their figures half preserved, half lost. The whispers of a once thriving civilization blend with the sound of the Aegean breeze. You can almost imagine the laughter of children echoing through courtyards, the rhythmic beat of a festival drum, the gentle lap of waves against Minoan ships returning from distant ports. And yet, these echoes fade as quickly as they appear. The Minoans are both present and absent, revealed and concealed. Their disappearance is not one of dramatic finality, but of gradual transformation. They remind us that not all lost civilizations perish in a single moment. Sometimes they drift into history like a tide receding from the shore. As we leave the world of the Minoans behind, the sea stretches endlessly outward, connecting Crete to land beyond. That same sea once carried traders to distant civilizations that followed their own mysterious paths into obscurity. And among the river valleys of South Asia, far from the blue waters of the Aegean, another advanced society thrived with extraordinary sophistication before it, too, quietly vanished. The Indus Valley civilization awaits us next, a world of precise city planning, undeciphered scripts, and silent streets that once echoed with life. Along the wide, fertile plains of the Indus River, where monsoon rains once nurtured lush fields and ancient waterways wove life into the land, there existed a civilization so sophisticated, so meticulously organized, that its silence today feels almost impossible. The Indus Valley Civilization, also known as the Harappan Civilization, thrived more than 4,000 years ago. At its height, it stretched across what is now Pakistan, northwest India, and parts of Afghanistan, forming one of the largest civilizations of the ancient world. And yet, for all its achievements, for all its architectural brilliance and cultural harmony, it left behind no deciphered records, no clear story of its people, and no lasting explanation of why it faded. Like a candle that burns brightly before quietly dimming, the Indus world disappeared with remarkable subtlety. As we imagine walking through the ancient city of Mohenjo-daro, the sense of order is striking. Long, straight streets form a precise grid. an urban layout so ahead of its time that modern planners often admire it as an early blueprint of city design. Houses were made of uniform baked bricks, stacked neatly and intentionally. Many homes had private bathrooms and drainage systems, connected to covered sewers that ran beneath the streets, an innovation more advanced than those found in some places centuries later. This civilization valued cleanliness and structure, creating spaces that feel surprisingly familiar to us today. Unlike the grand temples and palaces of Egypt or Mesopotamia, the Indus cities show little sign of towering monuments dedicated to kings or gods. Instead, their architecture suggests a society that was more communal than hierarchical, more focused on daily life than royal splendor. Large granaries indicate sophisticated food storage, and standardized weights and measures reveal a commitment to fairness in trade. Their craftsmanship was refined. Intricate beads, detailed pottery, and carefully carved seals showing bulls, elephants, and mysterious symbols. These seals remain some of the most tantalizing artifacts, beautifully made, rich with symbolic meaning, and written in a script that no one has been able to fully decode. The undeciphered script is one of the most persistent mysteries of the Indus Valley. Without a readable written record, we cannot hear the voices of its inhabitants. We cannot know the names of their leaders, the myths they recited, the laws they followed, or the songs they may have sung during festivals. Their silence is not a sign of a primitive culture. It is simply the result of time, erosion, and the loss of linguistic keys needed to unlock their words. And so we rely on their bricks, tools, and ruins to speak for them. What their cities reveal is a people deeply attuned to their environment. They harnessed river systems for agriculture, creating fields of wheat, barley, and other crops. They crafted boats for river transport and likely traded with distant regions, including Mesopotamia. Their toys, figurines, and everyday objects show a society that valued not just survival, but creativity and comfort. Yet as impressive as the Indus Valley civilization was in life, its disappearance is equally astonishing. Around 1900 BCE, the well-planned cities gradually emptied. Streets that once echoed with footsteps became quiet. Homes were abandoned. Craft centers stopped producing goods. It wasn't a sudden collapse marked by war or fire. Archaeologists find no evidence of mass destruction, no signs of violent invasion. Instead, the decline unfolded slowly, quietly, like a long exhale. One of the most widely supported explanations points to environmental change. The rivers that sustained the civilization began to shift. One major river system, the Ghaggar Hakra, believed by some scholars to be the ancient Sarasvati, started to dry up or change course. As water sources declined, agriculture suffered. Without reliable irrigation, food production would have become inconsistent, forcing people to move in search of better land. Climate change may also have played a role. Studies suggest that the region experienced decreased rainfall and cooler temperatures during the period of decline. Such gradual environmental changes could have strained resources and made large urban centers difficult to sustain. Over time, communities may have dispersed into smaller villages, abandoning the once thriving cities. Another theory suggests that shifting trade networks contributed to their fall. Trade with Mesopotamia declined as new routes were established elsewhere. With economic ties weakened, the Indus cities may have struggled to maintain their once strong industries. There is also the question of cultural transition. The Indus Valley did not vanish abruptly. Instead, its people seem to have merged into other emerging cultures of South Asia. The civilization dissolved, not through destruction, but through transformation. Their traditions, technologies, and ideas may have lived on, quietly shaping future societies without leaving a clear, singular trace. As we wander through the ruins in our imagination, the absence of temples and palaces becomes more noticeable. It suggests that their leaders may not have relied on displays of power or wealth to rule. Their society may have been more egalitarian than many others of the ancient world. But this also means that when difficulties arose, there were no monumental structures to preserve the story of their final years. Their identity faded into the land, into the shifting rivers, into the soil that covered their homes. One of the most haunting discoveries in Mohenjo-daro is a group of skeletons found in positions that led some early researchers to imagine a dramatic catastrophe. But later studies show that the placement of the bones was likely the result of later disturbances, not a sudden mass death. Even this dramatic theory dissolves into gentler explanations. And once again, the Indus Valley civilization remains peaceful in both life and disappearance. The contrast between their organized, thriving cities and the quietness of their decline creates a sense of serene mystery. It leaves us with the impression of a people who lived harmoniously with nature until nature gradually shifted around them. Their story is not one of conquest or collapse, but of change, slow, subtle, and deeply human. Standing before the remnants of their ancient cities today, the silence feels almost intentional, as though the Indus people, meticulous in life, left behind a final puzzle for the future, a civilization so advanced yet so understated that its disappearance feels like an unanswered question whispered across centuries. And as we leave the quiet, structured world of the Indus Valley behind, the landscape begins to shift. The flat plains give way to deserts and mountains. Trade routes stretch south and west, leading us toward another powerful ancient kingdom, one that rose proudly along the Nile's southern reaches, built its own pyramids, and shaped its own destiny before fading into the shadows of history. Our journey now moves to the kingdom of Kush, a civilization once vibrant, now wrapped in desert silence. In the vast, sun-drenched landscapes of ancient Nubia, where the Nile narrows between rocky banks and the desert stretches endlessly on either side, a powerful civilization once rose with grace, strength, and a quiet confidence that rivaled even its northern neighbor, Egypt. This was the kingdom of Kush, a realm of kings and queens, traders and warriors, builders and dreamers. For centuries, the Kushites shaped the cultural and political rhythms of Northeast Africa. They built their own pyramids, crafted unique art, and developed a legacy that echoed across the Nile Valley. And yet, like so many ancient civilizations, their story gradually faded into the sands, leaving behind stone monuments that whisper but never fully answer the questions of their disappearance. When we imagine the pyramids of the ancient world, our minds often go immediately to Giza. But far to the south, in modern-day Sudan, stands a field of pyramids smaller in size, yet rich with historical significance. The pyramids of Meroe rise from the desert like jagged silhouettes, their pointed tops casting long shadows during sunrise and sunset. These monuments belong to the rulers of Kush, pharaohs, queens, nobles, and priests who shaped a civilization as impressive as it was mysterious. The desert wind moves softly through these remains, carrying with it a faint echo of a kingdom once filled with vibrant life. The Kushites were deeply connected to the Nile. They built cities along its banks, using the river as both a lifeline and a highway. Their capital cities, Napata and later Meroe, were centers of culture, trade, and power. But unlike Egypt, whose history is recorded in detailed hieroglyphic texts, Kush did not leave behind extensive written chronicles. Their script, known as Meroitic, remains only partially understood. Without full translations, their voices remain faint, their stories incomplete. This lack of clarity gives their disappearance an even more enigmatic quality, leaving historians to piece together their narrative from ruins, pottery, inscriptions, and distant references in Egyptian and Greco-Roman accounts. The relationship between Egypt and Kush was complex, marked by periods of conflict, influence, and remarkable role reversals. There were times when Egypt conquered Kush, absorbing it as a southern province. But there was also a time when Kush rose in power, and its kings journeyed north to rule Egypt itself. The 25th dynasty of Egypt, the Black Pharaohs, as later historians called them, was ruled by Kushite kings who brought stability to the Nile Valley during a time of fragmentation. Under rulers like Pi, Shabaka, and Taharka, Egypt experienced a revival of traditional culture and architecture. The Kushites blended their own customs with Egyptian traditions, creating a fusion that remains one of the most fascinating chapters of ancient African history. Yet even during this era of power, the Kushites maintained their own identity. Their art, religion, and societal structures were not simply copies of Egypt's. They were distinct, rooted in the landscape and traditions of Nubia. They revered gods with African origins, crafted jewelry with intricate designs, and developed ironworking industries that helped sustain their economy. Meroe, in particular, became known as a center of iron production, its furnaces burning day and night, shaping tools, weapons, and trade goods that traveled across Africa. But as powerful and resourceful as they were, the Kushites were not immune to the shifting forces of time. Their decline, like that of many ancient civilizations, was slow and multifaceted. There was no single dramatic moment, no one battle or catastrophe that erased their kingdom. Instead, a combination of environmental, economic, and political changes gradually dimmed their influence. One significant factor may have been environmental degradation. The iron industry that powered Meroe required vast amounts of charcoal, which in turn relied on extensive forests. Over time, deforestation may have exhausted local resources, making metal production difficult and undermining their economic strength. As the land around the city changed, agricultural productivity may have declined as well, forcing people to adapt or migrate. Trade routes also shifted. As maritime trade along the Red Sea became more prominent, overland trade through the Nile Valley lost importance. The Kushites, who once stood at the crossroads of African and Mediterranean commerce, found themselves bypassed by new economic patterns. With fewer goods moving through their territory, wealth declined, and the kingdom's ability to maintain influence weakened. Political pressures added to these challenges. To the east, the rising kingdom of Aksum emerged as a powerful force. In the 4th century CE, Aksumite armies, aided by superior naval capabilities and expanding trade networks, launched campaigns that struck deep into Kushite territory. The city of Meroe eventually fell, marking a symbolic end to the kingdom's long era. But even here, the story is not one of total destruction. Some inhabitants likely migrated or integrated into surrounding communities, blending their culture with others rather than disappearing entirely. Yet, despite this gradual fading, the silence that surrounds Kush is profound. Their Meroitic script remains undeciphered, meaning we cannot read their royal decrees, their myths, or their accounts of daily life. Their perspective remains locked in ancient symbols, a persistent reminder of how easily history can lose entire voices. And while their pyramids and temples still stand, they speak most clearly of what we already know, that a great civilization once thrived here, shaping the Nile Valley with intelligence, artistry, and resilience. Standing among the pyramids of Meroe today, the atmosphere is strikingly peaceful. The desert is vast and quiet, and the stones glow golden in the sun. There are no crowds, no towering tourist structures, just the raw presence of history merging with the landscape. One can feel the weight of time here, not as something heavy, but as something gentle, almost protective. The silence is not empty. It is full of the unspoken stories of countless generations. The disappearance of Kush is neither a mystery of dramatic loss nor of sudden erasure. It is a story of transformation, of a civilization shifting, adapting, and eventually blending into the surrounding world until its distinct identity softened. And yet, the physical remnants they left behind refuse to let their legacy vanish completely. Their pyramids still rise. Their statues still gaze across the desert. Their influence still lingers in the cultural memory of the region. As we step away from the quiet desert surrounding Meroe, the path leads us further south across Africa, toward another ancient site wrapped in stone and silence. For just beyond the horizons of time, in the highlands of southern Africa, stands a city built of enormous stone walls, walls that curve gracefully across the landscape, hiding secrets of a powerful civilization that flourished and then faded, much like Kush. Our next journey takes us to Great Zimbabwe, where stone whispers yet another ancient mystery. In the heart of southern Africa, where rolling hills meet sweeping plateaus and the horizon seems to stretch endlessly, lie the enigmatic stone ruins of Great Zimbabwe. Massive walls curve like ancient rivers of granite, rising without mortar, fitted with such precision that they have withstood centuries of wind, rain, and shifting earth. These stones carry a quiet, solemn weight, as though they remember a time when thousands of people lived, traded, celebrated, and ruled within this vast stone complex. Great Zimbabwe was once the capital of a thriving empire, a place where gold caravans passed through, where kings held court, and where rituals shaped the rhythm of life. Today, it lies silent, majestic but mysterious, its decline still a subject of wonder and speculation. As you enter the great enclosure, the largest ancient structure in sub-Saharan Africa, the air feels noticeably different. The high granite walls curve gracefully, forming corridors and hidden pockets that create an atmosphere of both safety and secrecy. The famous conical tower, tall and imposing, stands like a sentinel watching over the past. This structure, unique in African architecture, may have symbolized the kingdom's wealth or spiritual authority, though scholars still debate its exact purpose. The craftsmanship displayed throughout the complex reveals a level of sophistication and planning often underestimated in early African civilizations. And yet, despite its grandeur, Great Zimbabwe left behind no written records, only stone, pottery, beads, and faint oral traditions that echo across generations. For centuries, outsiders struggled to accept that Africans had constructed such an advanced city. Early European explorers and colonial-era scholars tried to credit faraway cultures, Phoenicians, Arabs, even the biblical queen of Sheba, rather than acknowledge the architectural and cultural achievements of the Shona people. These false narratives persisted for decades, revealing more about the biases of the researchers than about the history of Great Zimbabwe itself. Today, archaeologists recognize the city as a pinnacle of indigenous African development, a testament to the ingenuity of the ancestors who shaped the region through trade, agriculture, and social organization. The mystery lies not in who built it, but in how such a powerful center eventually fell silent. At its height, between the 11th and 15th centuries, Great Zimbabwe sat at the heart of an expansive trading network. Gold, ivory, cattle, and iron flowed through the city, linking it to distant lands across the Indian Ocean. Traders from the Swahili coast sailed to Arabian and Persian markets, carrying goods that originated from the hills and rivers surrounding Zimbabwe. Chinese porcelain, Persian glassware, and Arabian beads found within the ruins showed just how far these connections stretched. This trade enriched the kingdom, enabling the rise of sophisticated elite who lived in stone structures, while most others lived in dwellings of wood and clay. Great Zimbabwe was not isolated. It was a key node in a global web of commerce and cultural exchange. Yet despite its power, the city did not last. By the 15th century, it began to decline, and by the 16th century, it was largely abandoned. The causes remain debated, each theory adding another layer of intrigue. One possibility is environmental pressure. As the population grew, the land surrounding the city may have struggled to support large herds of cattle and intensive farming. Soil exhaustion could have reduced crop yields, while overgrazing might have degraded pastures. Without sufficient resources, sustaining a large urban population would have become increasingly difficult. Another theory points to shifts in trade routes. As coastal trade centers rose in prominence, especially those in Mozambique and along the Indian Ocean, Great Zimbabwe may have lost its economic advantage. New powers emerged, such as the Kingdom of Matapa, which absorbed many of the region's trade networks. The elite who once ruled at Great Zimbabwe may have migrated to these new centers of power, leaving their monumental city behind as priorities shifted and opportunities changed. Political factors may also have played a role. As wealth accumulated among different groups, competition for power could have caused internal conflict. Fragmentation within the ruling elite might have weakened the city's cohesion, leading to migrations and the formation of smaller, competing states. Oral traditions hint at political changes, though without written records, the details remain elusive. This silence gives the story of Great Zimbabwe a dreamlike quality, tangible ruins paired with intangible truth. And then there is the possibility that climate change played a part. Some researchers believe the region experienced a prolonged drought that strained agricultural production and forced communities to move toward more fertile regions. The people may have left not because of collapse, but simply because the landscape around them no longer supported the bustling life that once thrived within the stone walls. In this sense, their disappearance may have been a slow dispersal rather than a dramatic abandonment. Walking through the ruins today, the sense of quiet is almost overwhelming. Birds move gently among the stones, and the wind drifts through narrow passages like a soft whisper. The city does not feel dead. It feels paused, as though life could return at any moment if only the world would shift slightly back into alignment. The patterns of the stone walls, the terraces, the tower, and the hilltop acropolis tell a story of deliberate design and deep cultural meaning. These structures reflect a society that valued order, symbolism, and perhaps spiritual significance embedded within the very layout of the city. Yet the most haunting aspect of Great Zimbabwe's mystery is not its decline, but its endurance. Even after the people left, the stones remained, sturdy, unbroken, carefully placed. They challenged the imagination, inviting visitors to fill the silence with their own theories, to sense the presence of a civilization that once thrived with energy, commerce, and cultural richness. And in that quiet, it becomes clear that Great Zimbabwe did not disappear in a dramatic flash. It simply changed, adapted, and eventually shifted into the next phase of regional history, leaving behind one of the most extraordinary archaeological sites on the continent. From the peaceful stillness of these stone ruins, our journey moves outward once more, beyond Africa's plateaus and into the vastness of the world's oceans. As civilizations rose on solid ground, others took to the sea, shaping their lives around waves, currents, and wind. Our next destination carries us across the water to a remote island realm whose sudden collapse continues to puzzle historians and explorers alike. The mysterious and isolated world of the Rapa Nui people, creators of the towering Moai statues of Easter Island. Far out in the South Pacific, surrounded by thousands of miles of open ocean, lies one of the most isolated inhabited places on Earth, Easter Island, known to its native people as Rapa Nui. It is a place where silence seems to hang in the air, where rolling green hills meet rugged volcanic cliffs, and where massive stone statues, the iconic Moai, stand watch like ancient guardians. These enigmatic figures, carved with elongated faces and solemn expressions, are among the world's most striking archaeological mysteries. Their makers built a thriving society on a tiny island, shaped by ingenuity and deep cultural belief. And yet, like many civilizations lost to time, the Rapa Nui people experienced a dramatic shift that left their once vibrant world changed forever. As you step onto the island in your imagination, the Moai dominate the landscape. Some stand proudly upright, their backs to the sea, gazing inland as if watching over villages long disappeared. Others lie toppled, broken, or half-carved in the quarries of Reino Ruraku, frozen at the moment when work abruptly stopped centuries ago. The island's silence amplifies their mystery. Who were the people who created these giants? How did they carve and transport such enormous stones using the limited resources available on an island barely 15 miles long? These questions have fascinated archaeologists, historians, and travelers alike for generations. The origins of the Rapa Nui people are thought to trace back to Polynesian voyagers who set sail across the Pacific in canoes, navigating by stars, waves, and birds. Their migration is a testament to human courage and exploration, for reaching such an isolated island was no small feat once settled. The early inhabitants adapted to the island's unique environment, its volcanic soil, limited freshwater sources, and dense forests. Over time, they developed a complex society with distinct clans, leaders known as Ariki, and spiritual beliefs that connected them deeply to their ancestors. The Moai were not merely statues. They were embodiments of ancestral spirits, believed to bring protection, prosperity, and mana, spiritual power, to their people. The creation of the Moai was a massive undertaking. Each statue could weigh several tons, carved for volcanic tuff using stone tools. The process required skilled artisans and organized labor, suggesting a society with structure, cooperation, and shared purpose. Once carved, the statues were transported from the quarry to ceremonial platforms called ahu. Early theories imagined the islanders rolling the statues on logs, but this raised questions about deforestation. More recent studies propose that the statues were walked upright using ropes in a controlled, swaying motion, a feat that demonstrates clever engineering rather than reckless resource use. The truth of their movement remains part of the island's lingering allure. But while the Moai tell a story of creativity and cultural cohesion, the later history of Rapa Nui is marked by profound change. For many years, scholars believe that the civilization collapsed due to self-inflicted environmental destruction, specifically the overharvesting of palm trees used to move the Moai. According to this older narrative, deforestation led to soil erosion, declining agriculture, warfare, and societal breakdown. It was a cautionary tale, a warning about what happens when humanity fails to care for its environment. Yet modern research paints a more nuanced picture. Evidence now suggests that deforestation on Rapa Nui may have been caused not by careless overuse, but largely by ecological factors beyond the islanders' control. The introduction of Polynesian rats, for example, likely contributed to the decline of palm trees by eating their seeds before they could germinate. The island's limited ecosystem, vulnerable to changes in climate and wildlife patterns, struggled to rebound once the forests had thinned. The people adapted by shifting their agriculture to rock gardens and creating innovative methods of soil preservation. These adaptations show resilience, not recklessness. The notion of a violent societal collapse has also been challenged. While some conflicts likely occurred, as they do in all civilizations, archaeological evidence does not support claims of widespread warfare or cataclysmic rebellion. Instead, the society appears to have reorganized over time, gradually moving away from Moai construction and toward new cultural practices. One such shift was the rise of the Birdman cult, centered around the sacred site of Orongo on the edge of a volcanic crater. This ceremonial tradition involved an annual competition to retrieve the first egg of a seabird from an offshore islet, a ritual that symbolized leadership and spiritual authority. The emergence of this new belief system suggests cultural evolution rather than collapse. The true devastation for the Rapa Nui people came not from internal downfall, but from external forces. European contact in the 18th and 19th centuries brought diseases to which the islanders had no immunity. Peruvian slave raids in the 1860s captured large portions of the population, including many leaders and knowledge bearers. When some survivors were eventually returned to the island, they carried introduced illnesses that decimated the remaining population. The cultural knowledge of Moai construction, the meanings of ancient glyphs, and the older social structures were deeply impacted by these tragic events. The world often attributes the decline of Rapa Nui to ecological mismanagement, but in truth, it was colonial exploitation that struck the harshest blow. Today, the island stands as a place of contemplation and resilience. The Moai that remain upright continue to watch over the land, their silhouettes striking against the sky. Restoration efforts have raised some of the statues back to their original platforms, while others remain where time left them, silent reminders of the past. The modern Rapa Nui people continue to reclaim their heritage, reviving traditions, language, and cultural identity with strength and pride. Their history is not simply one of loss, but of endurance. Walking among the moai, one feels a gentle weight, an awareness of time layered in stone. The island's quiet spaces, open plains, and volcanic ridges invite reflection. The mystery is not why the civilization vanished, but how it transformed, adapted, and survived despite overwhelming odds. The shift from stone statues to new belief systems, from isolation to global contact, from hardship to revival, makes Easter Island's story one of the most profound in the study of ancient societies. As we drift away from the windswept shores of Rapa Nui, our journey turns back toward the mainland, toward mist-covered mountains and cities built high above the clouds. The next civilization we explore also rose in isolation, carving out a powerful existence in dramatic landscapes. And like the Rapa Nui, they, too, left architectural wonders whose sudden abandonment continues to intrigue the world. Our next destination is the Andes, where the lost city of the Incas waits, suspended in time atop its sacred peaks. High in the Andean Altiplano, where the air is thin and the sky stretches endlessly in shades of pale blue, lies a civilization older than the Inca and more mysterious than many of the empires that followed. This is Tiwanaku, an ancient Andean power seated near the shimmering waters of Lake Titicaca. Here, at nearly 13,000 feet above sea level, monumental stone architecture rises from the earth. Massive blocks carved with impossible precision, temples aligned with the heavens, and monoliths etched with symbols that seem almost alive. The city's ruins feel silent yet deeply resonant, as though the stones themselves remember a time when priests, artisans, and rulers shaped a culture rooted in astronomy, agriculture, and spiritual connection to the highland landscape. But like many ancient civilizations we explore, Tiwanaku flourished, transformed, and eventually slipped into obscurity, leaving behind questions as open and vast as the plateau itself. As you approach the ruins, the first impression is one of raw immensity. The Kalasasaya temple stretches out in carefully arranged spaces, its stone columns rising solemnly like sentinels marking the passage of time. The most iconic feature, the Gateway of the Sun, stands carved from a single block of andesite weighing several tons. Its surface is adorned with a central deity, often interpreted as a sun god, surrounded by winged figures and intricate geometric patterns. The craftsmanship is astonishing, not only in artistic detail, but in the sheer engineering capabilities required to shape, transport, and position such massive stones in a harsh and unforgiving environment. The city's origins remain cloaked in mystery. Archaeologists estimate that settlement in the region may date back as early as 1500 BCE, but Tiwanaku truly rose to prominence around 500 CE, expanding over centuries into a major political and cultural center. At its height, it influenced territories stretching across modern-day Bolivia, Peru, Chile, and Argentina. The civilization's reach extended not through violent conquest, but through religious prestige, economic influence, and agricultural innovation. This gentle spread adds to the intrigue of Tiwanaku's story. It was a civilization that grew through connection rather than domination. One of Tiwanaku's most remarkable achievements was its mastery of high-altitude agriculture. The harsh Andean climate, with its intense sunlight, freezing nights, and unpredictable weather, challenged traditional farming methods. In response, the Tiwanaku people engineered an ingenious system known as raised field agriculture. They built long, elevated plots separated by water-filled canals. These canals absorbed heat during the day and released it at night, creating a protective microclimate that enabled crops like potatoes, quinoa, and tubers to thrive. This system not only fed a large population, but also fostered a kind of environmental harmony rarely seen in ancient societies. And yet, despite these innovations and its spiritual importance, Tiwanaku left behind no written language. Its records were kept in oral traditions, in symbolic carvings, and in the architecture of its sacred spaces. Without written accounts, scholars must decipher meaning through artifacts, alignments, and the scattered interpretations of later civilizations. This lack of direct voice makes Tiwanaku feel both present and distant. Its ruins solid, but its culture elusive, like a dream half forgotten upon waking. The spiritual life of the Tiwanaku people permeated every aspect of their society. Lake Titicaca, believed to be the birthplace of the gods in later Andean mythologies, played a central role in their ceremonial practices. Pilgrimages across the lake, rituals honoring deities linked to the sun, moon, and earth, and processions through the temple complexes were likely common. Even the city's layout reflects cosmological significance. The structures are aligned with celestial events such as solstices, suggesting a deep understanding of astronomy. When standing at the Kalasasaya temple during sunrise or sunset, the shadows and light move in deliberate patterns, as though the architecture itself is part of a sacred dialogue with the heavens. But Tiwanaku's grandeur did not last. Around the year 1000 CE, the civilization began to decline. Unlike some ancient societies that experienced sudden collapse, Tiwanaku's fall appears to have been gradual, shaped by environmental stress and social transformation. One widely supported theory points to a prolonged drought that lasted several decades. Such a drastic shift in climate would have severely affected their agricultural systems, leading to food shortages and population decline. Without strong harvests, the very foundation of their influence weakened. As resources grew scarce, the social and political structures that held the region together may have fractured. Communities once united under Tiwanaku's spiritual and economic influence could have drifted apart, forming smaller, independent groups. The ceremonial centers may have lost their significance as people turned their focus inward, prioritizing survival over the maintenance of monumental architecture and long-distance trade. Another layer of the mystery lies in the movement of people. Some scholars believe that large populations migrated to other regions, spreading Tiwanaku's cultural traditions even as their homeland faded. The influence of Tiwanaku can be seen in later Andean civilizations, including the Inca, who revered Lake Titicaca and adopted aspects of agricultural and architectural techniques reminiscent of their predecessors. This suggests that while the city itself declined, parts of its cultural legacy lived on through diffusion rather than disappearance. Today, walking through the ruins of Tiwanaku feels like walking through the remnants of a civilization that understood both the fragility and the power of its environment. The stones remain unmoving, but the wind that sweeps across the plateau carries a sense of memory. The Gateway of the Sun stands resolute, its carvings still sharp despite centuries of exposure. Nearby, the semi-subterranean temple holds stone heads embedded in the walls, faces of many styles and origins, possibly representing a gathering of ancestors or symbolic visitors from distant lands. The silence of Tiwanaku is not empty. It is full of echoes, the sound of distant ritual drums, the voices of priests interpreting the sky, the rhythmic work of artisans shaping stone, and the laughter of families moving through ceremonial plazas. You can almost imagine how this city once pulsed with life, how smoke from cooking fires rose into the cold mountain air, how pilgrims approached the temples with offerings of crops and woven textiles. As the sun sets on the Andean plateau, the ruins glow softly in golden hues. Long shadows stretch across the stone foundations, and the cold night begins to settle in. It is easy, in this moment, to sense both the greatness of what once was and the gentle mystery of what remains unknown. Tiwanaku, like so many ancient civilizations, reminds us that even the most formidable societies can be shaped by forces beyond their control: climate, time, migration, and transformation. From the mystical heights of the Andes, our journey continues toward another civilization whose disappearance has puzzled historians for decades. As we leave behind the wind-swept Altiplano, we step into the dense forests of Central America, where ancient stone cities rise from the jungle canopy. There, the Maya, masters of astronomy, writing, and architecture, built a world of remarkable sophistication before many of their great cities fell silent. Our next chapter takes us deeper into the rainforest, where temples pierce the treetops and unanswered questions linger in the shadows. Deep in the dense rainforests of Central America, where the canopy forms a green ocean and sunlight filters down in shimmering fragments, lie the remnants of one of the world's most astonishing civilizations, the Maya. Their cities rise like stone islands from a sea of trees, temples that reach skyward, plazas once alive with ceremony, palaces where rulers walked in intricate garments, and observatories aligned with celestial bodies. The Maya were masters of astronomy, mathematics, and writing, creators of a calendar system so sophisticated it still inspires awe today. And yet, many of their greatest cities, Tikal, Palenque, Copan, Calakmul, and others, were mysteriously abandoned long before European contact. The question of why such a vibrant civilization entered a period of profound transformation remains one of archaeology's most captivating puzzles. As you move deeper into the ruins, it's easy to imagine how these cities once felt. The towering temples were not abandoned relics, but bustling centers of life. Priests climbed steep staircases to observe the stars and record their movements. Rulers performed rituals meant to balance earthly and cosmic forces. Scholars etched glyphs on a stone stele, preserving knowledge for future generations. Markets would have filled open plazas with color and sound, as traders exchanged jade, obsidian, cacao, feathers, and textiles. The Maya world was far from simple. It was a complex network of city-states, each with its own rulers, alliances, rivalries, and spiritual traditions. Their architecture reveals their profound connection to both earth and sky. Temples were often designed to align with solstices and equinoxes, turning buildings into calendars of stone. At sites like Chichen Itza, shadows cast by the pyramid during the equinox form the image of a serpent descending the staircase, a breathtaking demonstration of astronomical mastery. In Tikal, temples rise so high that from their summits, ancient observers could look above the jungle canopy and watch the heavens unobstructed. This blend of science, spirituality, and artistry gives Maya cities an otherworldly feeling even in their silence. But as magnificent as the Maya cities were, their history is marked by dramatic shifts. After centuries of growth and innovation, something began to change around the 8th and 9th century CE. Monument building slowed, populations declined, and many major cities, especially in the southern lowlands, were gradually abandoned. It wasn't a sudden collapse in the way we might imagine. Instead, it was a slow unfolding, like a long exhale that signaled the end of an era. Archaeologists have proposed many theories, each offering clues to this ancient mystery. One significant factor may have been environmental stress. Evidence suggests that the Maya faced a series of prolonged droughts, which would have devastated their agriculture. The Maya relied heavily on rainwater for drinking and farming because much of their territory lacked rivers or natural lakes. Reservoirs and water management systems were sophisticated, but even these advancements had limits. As drought cycles intensified, crops like maize, central to Maya diet and mythology, would have failed, leading to food shortages, malnutrition, and weakened political stability. Population pressure may have compounded these challenges. At their peak, some Maya cities held tens of thousands of people, straining local resources. Deforestation for farming, construction, and fuel could have led to soil erosion, further reducing agricultural productivity. As farmland degraded, the delicate balance between population and resources may have collapsed, pushing communities to migrate or disperse. Political conflict also played a substantial role. The Maya region was not a single unified empire, but a constellation of independent city-states. Rivalries between powerful centers like Tikal and Calakmul spanned centuries. Wars were common, and as resources dwindled, competition for control may have intensified. Stele and carvings from this period show increased emphasis on warfare and dynastic conflict, suggesting that political instability was rising even as environmental stresses mounted. Another layer of complexity involves shifting trade networks. The Maya were deeply connected to broader Mesoamerican commerce, and changes in trade routes, perhaps favoring coastal areas or new centers of power, may have weakened the influence of traditional inland cities. As economic opportunities moved elsewhere, populations may have followed, leaving once thriving urban centers to fall into decline. Despite all these factors, it's essential to understand that the Maya did not vanish. Their cities may have been left behind, but the people themselves survived, adapted, and evolved. Descendants of the Maya still live in Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador. They speak Maya languages, maintain cultural traditions, and carry forward ancestral knowledge. The so-called collapse was not an end, but a transformation, one that shifted population centers, social structures, and political systems. Walking through a Maya ruin today, you feel the tension between presence and absence. You see the abandoned temples, yet you sense the lingering spirit of the people who once filled these spaces. The forest has reclaimed much of the architecture, roots weaving through stone, vines cascading down walls. But the carvings remain, their details still sharp. Kings wearing elaborate headdresses, priests holding ceremonial objects, glyphs recounting histories partially deciphered but still mysterious. The jungle's quiet only heightens the sense of ancient memory. One of the most haunting sights is the ball court, found in many Maya cities. Here, a ritualized game played with a rubber ball held symbolic meaning, representing cosmic battles or mythological narratives. Standing in the narrow alley of a ball court today, you can almost imagine the echoes of the past, the thud of the ball, the shouts of spectators, the intense ceremony surrounding each match. These courts remind us that Maya culture was rich not only in science and art, but also in spiritual and social tradition. The Maya also leave behind one of the most advanced writing systems in the ancient world. Their hieroglyphics, carved into stone or painted on codices, reveal complex histories and astronomical calculations. For centuries, the script resisted decoding, its meaning locked away like a treasure. But thanks to the work of linguists and Mayan descendants, much of the writing can now be read. Even so, gaps remain, adding another layer of mystery to the narrative of their decline. The silence of the Maya cities is not absolute. It is a listening silence, an invitation to explore. Each temple, each staircase worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, each stone carving is a doorway into history. Their disappearance from the great stone cities is a story woven from climate, conflict, migration, and change. It teaches us that civilizations are not destroyed by a single cause, but by a tapestry of interconnected forces. As we leave the rainforest and the shadows of Maya temples, our journey continues across continents once more. From the intricately carved cities of Central America, we travel to the rugged cliffs of the American Southwest, where another ancient culture built complex dwellings into the very bones of the landscape. Their stone-in mud structures, perched high in canyon walls, speak of resilience and ingenuity. Yet they, too, faced a mysterious departure, leaving behind homes that still cling to the cliffs like silent witnesses of the past. Our next destination brings us to the world of the ancestral Puebloans, where desert winds carry memories of a civilization that rose, flourished, and then quietly stepped away. In the cool shade of the world's oldest forests, where branches weave together like threads in an ancient tapestry, there once existed civilizations that rose quietly and disappeared just as softly. This section steps into those shadowed realms, where sunlight filters through dense canopies and the boundary between human history and the wilderness becomes almost indistinguishable. Unlike desert ruins, which lie exposed beneath open skies, forest civilizations are enveloped by nature's embrace, reclaimed slowly and intimately. Vines crawl over temples, roots pry open palace floors, and moss blurs the line between crafted stone and living earth. Here, The forest acts not as a destroyer, but as a patient painter, blending human legacy into its own vast, whispering world. These forest kingdoms often flourish in remote regions, places where humidity thickens the air, where rivers serve as ancient highways, and where the songs of insects create an ever-present backdrop. Their beginnings are often shrouded in oral traditions rather than written chronicles, which lends them an almost mythical aura. Many were masters of agriculture, constructing terraces or hidden irrigation systems that allowed them to thrive in environments modern eyes might deem too wild or too unpredictable. Yet despite their ingenuity, what they left behind is minimal. Stone foundations swallowed by roots, scattered artifacts half buried beneath layers of fallen leaves, and ceremonial sites whose purposes remain mysterious. The forest, both generous and unforgiving, reveals only fragments of what once was. One of the most intriguing aspects of these vanished societies is how seamlessly they seem to blend with their surroundings. They built with local materials, adapted their calendars to the rhythms of flora and fauna, and developed spiritual traditions rooted in the natural world around them. Temples were often aligned with forest clearings or celestial events visible only through narrow breaks in the canopy. Their art incorporated animal motifs, tree symbolism, and reverence for cycles of growth and decay. This deep ecological integration makes their disappearance feel almost like a return, an absorption back into the living world that had nurtured them. But mystery also lingers in the abruptness with which some of these forest civilizations appear to have vanished. Archaeological records suggest periods of sudden movement, abandoned settlements, and unfinished structures left mid-construction. Climate shifts may have played a role, altering rainfall patterns and threatening food supplies. Others point to diseases carried by traders or explorers, spreading rapidly in dense, interconnected communities. Some theories even suggest internal socio-political fractures, chiefdoms competing for resources or spiritual factions dividing once unified peoples. Yet the forest hides evidence so effectively that definitive answers remain elusive, leaving much to speculation and imagination. There is a haunting beauty in walking through the remnants of these forgotten societies. You might find a stone pathway that leads nowhere, ending abruptly under a curtain of vines. A carved face peeks from behind thick moss, its expression softened by centuries of rain. An ancient mound rises quietly from the forest floor, unnoticed by casual travelers, yet holding untold stories beneath its surface. These subtle traces create a gentle contrast between the world that was and the world that is, a living reminder that history does not always survive in grand monuments. Sometimes, it exists only as echoes woven into the fabric of nature. As we wander deeper into these lush realms, a sense of peaceful mystery settles in. Unlike dry deserts or storm-battered coastlines, forests conceal with softness. Their mysteries feel dreamy rather than harsh, like half-remembered tales told around low fires. Standing among towering trees that have silently grown for hundreds of years, one can almost sense the outlines of lives once lived here. The laughter of children, the rituals of elders, the rhythm of communities moving in harmony with the land. These impressions, though imagined, foster a quiet connection between the present and the forgotten past. Toward the end of this section, the narrative gently shifts from the forest's embrace toward open landscapes once more. The forest kingdoms, wrapped in green silence, represent a unique kind of disappearance, one shaped not by catastrophe alone, but by nature's slow, enveloping tenderness. As roots reclaim foundations and trees pierce through ancient floors, we are reminded that time can erase with gentleness just as easily as with violence. This soft fading sets the stage for the next chapter, where we follow the threads of these mysteries out of the woods and toward civilizations shaped by oceans, islands, and the pull of distant horizons. Across the restless boundary where land dissolves into waves, entire civilizations once thrived on islands that now feel like whispers scattered across the sea. This section drifts toward those remote oceanic societies, worlds defined by tides, storms, starlit navigation, and the quiet bravery of people who carved out lives in places suspended between isolation and possibility. Their rise was shaped by the rhythm of the sea, and their disappearance remains tied to its shifting moods. On these islands, mysteries linger not in sand or forest depths, but in the vast blue that surrounds every shoreline, stretching endlessly toward the unknown. Island civilizations developed unique ways of life, guided by the constraints and gifts of limited land. They mastered fishing techniques, cultivated terrace farms, and built intricate communities that relied on balance with nature rather than dominance over it. Many crafted myths around the ocean itself, honoring it as both a provider and a threat. Their traditions reflect this duality. Rituals for safe voyages, songs about creation rising from the deep, and carvings depicting guardians who stood watch over coasts. Yet despite these cultural treasures, many of these societies left behind only faint traces. Weathered stone platforms, isolated statues gazing across empty waters, and ceremonial sites whose meanings remain locked behind tides of time. The mystery deepens when we examine how abruptly some of these island communities seem to disappear from the historical record. Rising sea levels may have swallowed coastal villages, pulling them beneath the waves. Powerful storms could have reshaped entire landscapes, erasing fields and homes in a single night. In some regions, shifts in trade routes left previously thriving islands isolated, eventually leading to population decline. Others may have exhausted the limited resources available, forcing migrations that left their once vibrant homelands empty. As with all vanished civilizations, the truth likely lies in a combination of factors, yet the ocean's vastness amplifies the uncertainty. Evidence may lie submerged, waiting to be found, or already lost forever. Oceanic mysteries are unique because they exist on a fluid frontier. Land-based civilizations leave behind foundations, roads, and walls that time erodes slowly. But the sea reclaims swiftly and completely. Coral grows over ruins. Currents scatter artifacts across the seafloor. Entire settlements can slip into underwater silence, making their retrieval a delicate and uncertain endeavor. This dynamic reshapes how we interpret their histories. What appears abandoned may simply be hiding beyond our reach, protected by depth and darkness. The ocean keeps its secrets differently, offering glimpses rather than answers. Yet despite the uncertainty, there's an unmistakable beauty in imagining the world these island societies once knew. Picture lanterns glowing along shoreline paths, guiding fishermen returning from moonlit waters. Imagine navigators studying the stars, reading the sky as if it were an ancient manuscript. Envision ceremonial gatherings where music mingled with the sound of waves, creating melodies carried far across the sea. These scenes remind us that even the most isolated places held vibrant human stories, stories now softened by salt air and time. As we drift further, the section explores the psychological pull of oceanic mysteries. There is something deeply compelling about lost islands, perhaps because islands themselves feel fragile, like fleeting visions that appear on the horizon only to vanish again. They evoke a sense of separation, of worlds existing just out of reach. When a civilization disappears from such a setting, it evokes a poetic blend of melancholy and wonder. Did they leave willingly, sailing toward new horizons? Or are they claimed by the unpredictable forces of nature? The sea offers no clear explanations, only the gentle, persistent whisper of waves against the shore. Toward its close, the section begins transitioning toward broader global interconnections. The island civilizations, though remote, were not entirely isolated. They exchanged ideas, navigational skills, and traditions across great distances, forming maritime networks that stretched farther than many imagine. These dispersed threads lead us into the next part of the documentary, where the focus shifts from islands toward the highlands, plains, and river valleys that held their own enigmatic disappearances. With the ocean's lingering mystery behind us, we prepare to step back on solid ground, guided by the same quiet curiosity that has followed us across deserts, forests, and now the edge of the endless sea. Across deserts, forests, islands, and forgotten plains, every vanished civilization seems isolated at first glance. Each one a solitary mystery preserved in its own environment, shaped by its own struggles, and silenced by its own disappearance. But as we step into this section, we begin gently stitching together the threads that tie these lost worlds into a larger, interconnected tapestry. This is where patterns emerge, where similarities echo across continents, and where we sense that history, though scattered, often rhymes. The goal here is not to solve the mysteries outright, but to explore the hidden currents of connection that link places separated by vast distances and thousands of years. Some of these connections are practical, rooted in the universal needs of human societies. Whether nestled in dense jungles or perched on coastal cliffs, ancient people found ways to adapt to their surroundings using ingenious systems that mirror one another. Terraced farming in the highlands of one region resembles techniques used half a world away. Monumental stonework from remote islands shares surprising architectural traits with civilizations that had no known contact. Symbols carved into temple walls appear with uncanny similarity across cultures that lived centuries apart. These parallels might be coincidences, human creativity converging on similar solutions, or they could hint at deeper, long-forgotten exchanges through trade, migration, or shared ancestral memory. But there are also subtler threads that link these societies, woven not from stone or tools, but from belief, fear, and hope. Many lost civilizations worshipped sky deities, revered celestial cycles, or aligned their sacred structures with solstices and equinoxes. Others believed their ancestors returned through natural elements, wind, water, fire, or earth. Across many cultures, myths tell of great upheavals, floods that reshaped landscapes, droughts that tested devotion, or omens in the heavens signaling times of transition. These stories echo across continents, suggesting that ancient peoples, despite geographic separation, perceive the world with strikingly similar reverence and imagination. As we explore these shared patterns, the narrative takes on a calm, meditative tone. These connections are not presented as definitive answers, but as gentle observations, like discovering familiar footprints on opposite sides of a river. They enrich the mystery rather than diminish it, offering viewers a deeper sense of unity among the world's forgotten societies. Instead of viewing each vanished civilization as an isolated puzzle piece, we begin to see them as fragments of a larger mosaic shaped by shared human impulses to build, to worship, to explore, and to survive. This section also reflects on how disappearance itself creates parallels. Many of these civilizations faced environmental pressures, whether rising seas, expanding deserts, shifting climates, or changes in local ecosystems. Their responses varied, yet the patterns of struggle are alike. Some migrated, others collapsed internally, while a few adapted until adaptation was no longer possible. These shared endings form another quiet connection, a reminder that even the most advanced societies are vulnerable to forces beyond their control. The contrast between their ingenuity and their fragility gives their stories a profound emotional resonance. Beyond environmental echoes, trade networks reveal additional links. Even in ancient times, goods traveled astonishing distances. Shells from one coast found in inland temples, minerals from mountains traded to forest settlements, and seeds carried unknowingly across lands by travelers and merchants. These exchanges blur the sharp boundaries we often imagine between civilizations. A pot found in a remote excavation may contain materials from faraway lands, evidence that ancient cultures reached outward, forming bonds that have since dissolved like footprints in the tide. These fragile remnants of connection speak to the shared human desire to explore beyond the horizon, to find common ground with strangers, and to create bridges of exchange long before modern borders existed. We then reflect on a more philosophical layer of connection, the way time transforms every society, regardless of size or achievement. Civilizations rise with ambition and fall with quiet inevitability, leaving behind question marks for future generations. This cyclical nature binds all lost cultures together, forming a universal story of creation, endurance, and eventual dissolution. The viewer is invited to consider how the legacies of these ancient peoples continue to shape the modern world, not through grand monuments alone, but through ideas, techniques, myths, and cultural echoes that subtly endure. As we move toward the end of the section, the focus shifts to how these connections influence our perception of mystery. When we see each vanished civilization not as an isolated anomaly, but as part of a global narrative, the mystery becomes richer, more layered. It is no longer just about what happened to one kingdom or island. It becomes a meditation on human existence, on the delicate balance between flourishing and fading, and on the invisible threads that tie history together. Every ruin, no matter how distant, becomes part of a larger story of humanity's resilience and vulnerability. The section concludes with a gentle transition toward the documentary's later themes. Having explored the patterns and parallels between lost civilizations, we prepare to shift our attention toward the interpretations, theories, and lessons their disappearances offer today. The quiet bridge formed here leads naturally into reflections on how these mysteries resonate with our modern world, how they raise timeless questions about identity, sustainability, and the endurance of human memory. As these threads weave together, we find ourselves ready to step into the next chapter with a deeper sense of connection and curiosity, carrying forward the quiet wonder that has followed us from the very beginning. There comes a moment in every long journey through forgotten history when the ruins, artifacts, and unanswered questions begin to feel less like the remnants of distant strangers and more like quiet mirrors reflecting back on us. This section enters that reflective space, the place where mystery meets meaning, where we pause to consider what these vanished civilizations truly tell us about the human story. We have wandered through deserts that bury secrets, forests that cradle them, islands that hide them beneath waves, and trade routes that stitch the ancient world together. Now, we turn inward, interpreting the echoes left behind by those who lived, thrived, and then disappeared without a trace. Their absence becomes a lesson, a whisper, a soft reminder carved into the edges of time. One of the first reflections invites us to consider the fragile balance between human ambition and the natural world. So many lost civilizations mastered their environments with extraordinary skill, irrigating deserts, carving terraces into mountainsides, navigating treacherous seas, or bending forest landscapes into complex urban networks. Yet their disappearances often reveal the limits of that mastery. Climate shifted, rivers changed course, forests retreated or grew too dense, and coastlines vanished under rising tides. These environmental transformations were not always catastrophes. Sometimes they were slow, creeping changes that tested societies over generations. Their ruins echo with the lesson that civilizations must adapt constantly, that no triumph over nature is ever permanent, and that even the most ingenious systems can falter when the land itself transforms beneath them. Another reflection lies in the complexity of human societies, their politics, beliefs, and internal struggles. As much as environmental pressures shaped their fates, many lost civilizations also fell due to internal fractures. Leadership disputes weakened unity. Social hierarchies created tensions. Resources became unevenly distributed, pushing communities toward conflict. These internal storms often unfolded quietly, leaving behind little trace, yet casting long shadows over what would follow. In this sense, vanished civilizations remind us that human challenges are timeless. The same tensions that unraveled ancient societies, power, inequality, isolation, identity, are threads still woven into the fabric of modern life. Their stories offer a soft caution, not through fear, but through understanding. Yet, woven among these cautionary echoes is something profoundly inspiring: the resilience, creativity, and joy that defined ancient life before its decline. Too often, vanished civilizations are remembered solely for their disappearance, but their existence was filled with innovation, beauty, and vibrant culture. Their art, tools, architecture, and myths speak to a deep human desire to create meaning in the world. They observed stars with astonishing precision, built monuments in perfect harmony with celestial cycles, and crafted mythologies that explored life, death, nature, and the cosmos. Interpreting these echoes shows us that even societies that eventually faded contributed something lasting to human understanding. Their voices may be faint, but they still shape us. This section also reflects on the importance of mystery itself. There's a reason we continue to feel drawn to lost civilizations, even when answers remain incomplete. Mystery slows us down. It invites curiosity, encourages wonder, and opens a gentle space for imagination. In a world full of information and constant noise, these ancient enigmas offer something rare: an invitation to pause and simply marvel. The unknown becomes comforting, a reminder that not everything must be explained to be meaningful. These mysteries foster a quiet companionship across centuries, bridging the gap between the living and those who vanished long ago. A deeper reflection emerges when we consider the fragments these civilizations left behind. A shard of pottery, a half-erased symbol, a weathered statue, each fragment becomes a small piece of human memory. Archaeologists interpret these remnants using science, but there is also something poetic in how we, as observers, interpret them through imagination. A deserted pathway hints at footsteps once taken. A broken tool hints at hands that crafted and used it. A silent plaza suggests gatherings, celebrations, and stories told around fires. These fragments remind us that history is not only a collection of facts, but also a tapestry woven from interpretation. The gaps in the record give room for gentle storytelling that honors those who came before. Reflecting on these ancient people also raises questions about legacy. What remains of a civilization after it fades? Is it the physical structures they built, or the values they carried? Is it the myths they left behind, or the quiet influence they had on neighboring cultures? Perhaps legacy is something softer, a ripple that travels forward through time, shaping the world in ways that are subtle but enduring. Many modern techniques in agriculture, navigation, medicine, and craftsmanship trace back to ancestors who lived in places that no longer appear on maps. Their presence still lingers, not in grand monuments, but in the everyday rhythms of human life. This section also turns gently toward the emotional landscape of loss. Not loss in a dramatic sense, but in the calm, contemplative way we experience when thinking about the past. There is a tenderness in knowing that lives were lived fully in places now silent. People loved, dreamed, created, and hoped just as we do, even though their stories ended long before ours began. This quiet contemplation encourages empathy across time. It reminds us that history is not merely about kings, wars, and monuments, but about ordinary lives that formed the heartbeat of their world. Interpreting their echoes becomes a way of honoring those who left no written record, yet shaped the human story in countless ways. A particularly meaningful reflection arises from the idea that disappearance is not the same as erasure. A civilization may vanish physically, but its influence can continue invisibly. Ideas travel. Technologies spread. Myths migrate from one culture to another, evolving along the way. Even the act of disappearance becomes part of global memory. Some lost civilizations serve as warnings, others as inspirations, and still others as enduring mysteries that spark creativity and exploration. In this way, their absence becomes a kind of presence, one that guides our interpretations and shapes our understanding of what it means for a society to endure. As this section approaches its gentle close, the focus shifts toward our place in this ongoing story. Every civilization, including our own, exists within the larger arc of human history, a vast timeline filled with creation, discovery, adaptation, and eventual transformation. The echoes of ancient societies encourage us to think about how the future might interpret us someday. What traces will we leave behind? Which of our achievements will survive the passage of time? Which mysteries will we unintentionally create? These questions are not meant to provoke fear, but to inspire reflection, reminding us that the story of humanity is still unfolding. The final paragraphs prepare the listener for the concluding section. Having interpreted the echoes of lost civilizations, we now move toward a closing reflection, one that ties together the journey across forgotten landscapes, the mysteries explored, and the quiet insights gained along the way. With a calm breath, the narrative shifts toward the horizon, inviting us to step into the final chapter with a deeper appreciation for the beauty, fragility, and enduring wonder of civilizations that vanished without a trace.